be back here at the Heroes Global Championship, and our teams only have 5 weeks left of league play before playoffs for our Global Championship at BlizzCon. I'm Gillyweed here as always with Dreadnought Dread. Are you ready to get back into it?
I'm ready. You know, it was a small break that we got. We had the Western Clash, we got the Eastern Clash, but it's back to the best of the best in North America. And I don't want to keep anybody waiting, especially myself, because I've been, honestly, I'm pretty eager for this to get back going.
Yeah, we've got 2 very exciting matches for today, but before we get to that, let's see where we left things off at the end of Part 1 in our standings. And honestly, it was a bit of a kerfuffle to figure out who was going to be up at the top of the standings, but in the end, it ended up being Gale Force Esports. And honestly, as close as it was for Part 1 makes me really excited that it could be equally as close as we get ready for the end of Part 2 and playoffs for BlizzCon.
And we have another major story there at the bottom half of these standings between superstars, Even in Death and Lag Force, formerly known as Naventic, all struggling to keep themselves out of that Crucible range. It has been a long and tragic tale for superstars and Lag Force, but Even in Death, you know, the new guys coming in, very low expectations, and they have really breaking through those.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that we have these 5 teams up at the top all wanting to vie for those 3 spots at BlizzCon, and then we have these 3 teams down at the bottom all just hoping upon hoping that they can avoid the Crucible, because obviously the Crucible is not the end of you being an HGC, but it does mean it could be.
I mean, it's not a place anybody wants to go, you know? It's nice when you have that job security, you're comfortable, you know where you're going, you know who you're playing the next week, but suddenly where you're playing an opponent that you haven't been scrimming against, you're fighting for legitimately your job, but more importantly, your passion and your heart and soul. It's a scary place to go, and so you know, my heart's out there for those 3 teams that are kind of fighting for it. But one of them, they'll make it out.
Well, let's see who's going to be on the docket to play today in today's schedule. We started off after HGC Korea with HGC Europe and the expected victories for Tricked Esport, and things were close for Dig, but Dig in the end were able to pull out a victory there over Playing Ducks. In North America, at the end of today, we have got such an incredible, awesome match to start things off with Team Freedom versus Roll20, but first, we see 2 new names, but 2 familiar teams. We've got Lag Force going up against Space Station Gaming.
And Lag Force being Naventic and Space Station Gaming being No Tomorrow under a new organization here. Either way, I'm ready for it. It's going to be a close one. I feel like Naventic obviously still showing signs of struggle, but no, under the name of No Tomorrow. Space Station Gaming now, their weeks number 3, 4, and 5 of Phase 2 Part 1 was not necessarily the same tale as we saw in weeks 1 and 2. So I'm immediately looking, what are they going to carry over? What positives do we see? What negatives still carry over? What developments do we see from the squad now at the beginning of Part 2?
Yeah, Space Station started off Part 1 with a bang and then ended it with a fizzle, and there have been a lot of questions as to whether they belong up in the same tier with the other 4 teams that we talk about with a good possibility of being able to claim one of those BlizzCon spots. And this was their first chance to show that they do belong there. So let's hear from both of our teams about this first match of Part 2.
The reasoning behind us going for boot camp is just because we wanted to improve a lot, and the last 2 weeks that we had of HGC we didn't play very well and our scrims weren't looking very good, so we just decided to go like prepare really hard because this is the BlizzCon split, right? So we want to do the best we can, and the boot camp's going to help a lot with that. Against Slag F, we just want to get a 3-0. You know we're a way better team than them, and we just want to play clean, don't lose anything, have like clean out games really well and not throw.
I think everyone's mellowed out during the break. Everyone's had a chance to chill out, not stress over the games, and I feel like that'll help us a lot going to this next split. We made a lot of swaps in this first split, but I feel like we are sold on me on support and Zun on tank because that seems to be what's working best most of the time, so I think that's what we're going to try and stick with. I am glad for No Tomorrow getting a sponsor. I feel like they really deserve it. But other than that, the set, it'll be a really close set, but we might be able to take some advantage of some of their weaknesses during the set, but I still feel like it'll be a pretty hard set. We're planning some super top secret strategies for SS. We feel like they won't see it coming.
Top secret strategies in store for Lag Force. Can I just say, I mean, we've got to talk about that logo.
What do you got to say about it, Gilly?
It's a sloth. It's amazing.
It is a sloth.
That's it. We have to talk about it, and now we have done that. So let's move over and talk about Space Station Gaming.
Their logo's pretty cool, too.
It is pretty
I mean,
cool.
it's a literal astronaut. Yeah, that's all I had to add. Sorry.
we're doing really good on this whole analysis thing. Before we get into the drafting and kick things off for this first series, we've got the global progress for the cheers, and you guys have been cheering your hearts out. Love it. We got to see the crossover for 15 million cheers during HGC Europe today. I don't want to see it let up. Let's keep going to the Arcane Chaos Lizard.
I'm ready for it. You know, I want me a deadly Chaos Lizard even later on after that. There are a lot of things to be cheering for, but more importantly, your favorite team, guys. These guys work their butts off to compete at the HGC for each and every one of you, and the support helps them across the board. I mean, I'm a little bit jealous, I'll be honest, that I didn't get to spray the Temple Storm banner while it was currently my own name. I'll be honest, every single time I throw it down, I'm just like, oh, it feels bad. It's not me, you know?
Yeah, it's a little bit, at least nostalgic. Throw it to the past a bit, but maybe just not quite the same. Speaking of not quite the same, since these two teams have changed up ownership, changed up their names, their old items are right now still available, and you'll be able to use those if you cheer for them and are able to unlock them. But coming soon will be a switch to the Lag Force as well as the Space Station Gaming, so get them while they're hot.
Yeah, and then you can get your
sloth.
You can get your sloths and your astronauts later on, you know? Yeah. So it's the best of both worlds here. But yeah, it's limited edition. You can be like a bit of a hipster, be like, you know, I cheered before it was cool, before we hit that 15 million mark, and on to our epic mounts. That's all I had.
All right, let's get into the drafting for game one. Starting with the Battleground, we're going to Battlefield of Eternity, chosen by the sloths of Lag Force. Gosh, I love that logo. Bans on Warhead Junction and Braxis Holdout. Not too surprising for those two, but we've got Battlefield of Eternity. Again, not surprising at all to see that as a pick for Lag Force. Yeah,
it's been a go-to for them for a long while. I do want to say that naturally when we look at the two teams, traditionally, I want to say Niventic and what is now, oh my goodness, Lag Force. This is going to take me a bit here.
We should have a jar and just put coins in it because it's going to happen. There's also Superstars at Space Station. There's 2 double S's.
It's a hard time to be a commentator. But what I was going to say is that this is an old school map for them, and I would give them the slight edge. But again, Space Station Gaming has been such a strong team, and they have shown very polar results. And if we see the more succinct and, you know, combined and I don't know what I'm trying to get across here, on the same page cohesive version of Space Station Gaming, I'm confident here that they may be able to take this first game.
Well, Dread, I wanted to get into talking a little bit about Space Station's drafting as we are starting up the draft for game number 1, because as I mentioned before, they started off with a bang and then fizzled out by the end of part 1, and I was trying really hard to kind of figure out what it is about that, and we heard Equinox's side of it, but I was looking at some of the drafting, and Task Tracer was huge for them at the start of part 1. 2 out of the 3 games they won versus Team Freedom and Tempo Storm, they had Task Tracer, and they almost beat Gale Force Esports. Went to game 5, but Gale Force was able to beat their Task Tracer on Tomb. Then, of course, Tassadar started to become more and more popular. It got bans more and more as part 1 went on. They started going up against teams who knew them more, like Even and Death 2. They scrimmed versus them a lot. And then when you look at how they adapted, they went into a lot of different experimental type styles. They were a team that was really willing to experiment a lot more over things, like bringing in their Probius, right? Or even Tyrande. And those experiments didn't really pay off for Space Station Gaming when they went up against evenly skilled teams. They actually, all of Equinox's heroes that he played just one time in part 1 were all losses. So I think what I would like to see them is maybe try to, I'm hoping that that boot camp that they had and Equinox talked about is what is going to allow them to kind of hone in on the strategies that work best for them.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where it seems like they came in with like, generally this is what we are very effective at, but then when their opponents are able to address those specific elements of the composition, identify what are the actual individual strengths of the roster, suddenly it didn't look as good. And the comfortability of the teams that they were playing against, like there's a lot of variables that went into it. But either way, Space Station Gaming, a lot of their difference maybe is into the draft. And I agree with you. I'm going to be looking for it here. Sadly, Task Tracer isn't an option as Lag Force getting the ban. No surprise since it is BOE. And then the Genji Abathur already here for Lag Force.
Ooh, but Space Station at least is going to continue their experimenting a little bit. We don't know yet how popular Garrosh is going to be in North America, though. We saw it a little bit in Europe.
Yeah, we saw probably more than I kind of expected at first glance here. The general tone does seem to be like, you got to respect the guy. The way that he plays out, mainly with his toss, having the opportunity to be able to fling the opponent into terrible position, makes suddenly the draft have to be way more focused on getting a gap closer onto your main warrior, and then more importantly is just everybody, you can't make that mistake. You know, it's very easy to get that punishment here. So I'm excited to see how it unfolds, especially on a map like BOE where we know that dance is going to last for long periods of time. I expect a couple of flings here and there for Space Station.
Yeah, it'll especially last a long time earlier on because ideally that's what Lag Force wants now with their Abathur composition. They want to get to a point where he can be free to split push one of the lanes and they could slow things down. But Space Station's going to ban out Leeming. Lag Force has liked Leeming in the past, but they love Lunara here too. And with the Genji already, it's possible we might see Big Impact pick her up once again.
Yeah, I was going to be very curious on how this meta develops right now because we're playing on a patch that is not the exact same as the Western and Eastern Clash, but it wasn't so heavily changed that I expected a colossal meta shift outside of the implementation of obviously Garage. And so already it's less emphasis still into the, Ariel has yet to show up, which we know has been a huge focal point at those international tournaments. And I'm mainly just like, I'm ready to see what North America has kind of developed with this rather than coming in with those expectations because it's not often we see a team be willing to play the exact same meta after a major tournament in NA, especially knowing there's a huge nerf on that direct strategy. So you avoid it knowing it's going to die out in a week. And it seems like that's what we see here for these teams right now with avoiding that strategy. So at this point, I feel it can go any direction for either one of the squads. Lag Force is going to stick Tomster onto that Karazim. Not surprising considering it is BOE. More importantly, they have really highly prioritized him onto that hero. And Tomster really, he's shown a lot of improvement on his Karazim.
He's shown a lot of improvement across all of his supports. He has been, to be thrown into the fire of needing to be able to adapt really quickly, I feel like he did a fantastic job through part 1, and I am very excited for Tomster. And also for B-Kid, to see how B-Kid has been able to adapt into his new role, because we saw in their very last series of Part 1 versus Even in Death, they swapped Zuna back to main warrior where he's been before. This is kind of a common trend for the members of old Naventic, now Lag Force, to role swap when they feel like something needs to change. That's the first sort of go-to thing it seems for them. And I'm ready to see how B-Kid can do because B-Kid... Has B-Kid ever not been a warrior player?
Not really, no. Not to my knowledge. I mean, other than the wild game here and there and like solo queue, but everybody plays everything in solo queue, right? So I do not know, but we've got ourselves a wild Artanis coming out for Space Station Gaming and that Lunar to back it up. A very melee-heavy composition. A lot of damage, though, from them, and they got the Lunar to get the AoE slow, enabling them. I'm going to be honest, my power level understanding of Garage is, I'm torn. I'm ready to see it kind of unfold in front of us, but other than that wild hair, I still feel like the draft for Space Station here is pretty solid and generally decently well-rounded. Obviously, the Artanis is always going to have the Artanis factor, how many swaps hit. If he hits H82 level of swaps, I'm convinced this is Space Station's game, but that's going to be probably unlikely. Very few Artanises, if any Artanis, are on the same level of H82.
He also can be fairly flexible for the team, depending on how they want to play out Immortal phases. With Amateur Opponent, he does a lot of damage to an Immortal. He does a lot of damage sieging into structures, too. So there are some different ways that Space Station could try to play it out. But yeah, the Triple Warrior is very interesting to me. Swaps into Wrecking Ball throws, into drags. Someone could get displaced for a mile from Lag Force, but let's see who this last pick's going to be.
We got ourselves a Zagara.
Okay.
Wow. All right. There is a lot to say about this draft coming up from Gale Force Esports, mainly and how insanely focused it is onto the macro play on not such a heavy macro map. I'm expecting a Baneling focus build coming out from the Zagara to be able to better aid with her race, specifically at the 4 and 7 with the bonus damage and the increased Baneling count. But this, I'm not going to say, this is one of the best maps, the 2-lane maps, like Braxis, where you see Nidus Network gain a lot of value. I wouldn't hate a Devouring Maw.
I wouldn't either. Look at all those melees.
Exactly. Suddenly I'm like, wow, this could be a really cool innovation. Very good siege damage coming out, but also an opportunity to abuse that concentration into the melees on the side of Space Station. Either way, Devouring Maw or not, I'm still a little bit skeptical of the Zagara. But I'm looking forward to see how they play it out.
Well, it was Lag Force's Battleground choice, and they did say that they had some special strategies that they were going to employ versus Space Station Gaming. I guess the double specialist is pretty...
That's wild.
It is wild.
It's catching them off guard. It just suddenly makes the game a lot more focused on to the earlier stages, how effectively can they abuse the Genji with the Abathur hat and using Karazim, dashing him back and forth, that pressure around the early stages. But if they hold on a flat, even 10 versus 10 game and suddenly Lag Force gains a momentum into a team fight, I feel like their comp can be really oppressive. But it needs to get to that state, and
Yeah.
it needs to get post 10. And that's my only concern that I see displayed here is a Zag Abathur levels 1 through 9. I'm just like, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm going to teamfight you as much as I possibly can.
Well, exactly, because the Abathur already is weakened in a weakened state, and then you add Artanis, who gets the value right away from amateur opponent at level 1, and then if you get behind as a Zagara team, if you're going to Nidus network, then it is a whole different ballgame. You really want to be winning and being ahead so that you already have a great setup for once you hit 10, you can immediately start going with your Nidus network. But now with Abathur 2, it almost makes me think even more so that that's going to be Devouring Maw.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because Abathur makes up for the global, so then you should move into the Maw to like not necessarily double down,
Yeah.
but it does make that composition, if they go in that direction, that much more high risk, high reward. Because if they are successful in the early stages, Abathur on a winning team already levels 1 through 9, insanely oppressive. Zagara, doubly so. So putting that on the same team, if they are like, if you see that level lead, I just go, how do you lose this game? Because you are going to dominate the minion waves, control the vision very well. Like, other than the freak Artanis swap or Garage flip, you should be fine.
Yeah, it's up to Space Station to get those picks and get the early Immortals. Let's get into game number 1 on Battlefield of Eternity between Lag Force and Space Station Gaming.
Here we are to get into it. It is Lag Force in the blue, where we are having Tomster playing that Karazim. Big impacts on the Genji. We're going to have ourselves a Zagara played by B-Kit. iDreams on the Abathur, and we had Zuna there on Murden.
And we have a pause. The members of Space Station Gaming,
I'm already.
we'll wait on introducing them. Go ahead.
I'm just going to throw out my conspiracy theory. Do we always get a pause at the beginning of every series if Lag Force is in the game? Because right now they're 100% ratio. I'm just saying, conspiracy dread has to come out with my wild theories once in a while. Here's the one I'm busting out for the beginning of part 2.
Yeah, I will say there are certain teams that I tend to prepare more fill strategies for, just in case. So let's talk about Gamescom. Hello. There have been some awesome announcements over Gamescom for Heroes of the Storm. I know you've played Kalthazet and had a lot of fun.
I did.
To my detriment.
I had a lot of fun on Kalthazad. I mean, once I got my passive, the questing onto his passive, I believe it's like Blight is the wording they use on it. Once I got my Blight completed, if I was able to hit a chain combo on somebody, I mean, it was just about so much damage coming in, a lot of fun. And the chain dynamic is such an interesting element to be brought in to Heroes of the Storm. Once again, in the blue is going to be yourselves of the Lag Force and Space Station Gaming over in the red.
Here's Space Station Gaming with Tiger JK, support player, playing Rhaegar. Up next playing Dahaka will be, well, Casanova will be playing Garrosh. I assume the Dahaka is going to be Jason Equinox playing Artanis. And finally, Lunara, played by Talking Trees.
All right, so in the world of Garrosh here, what do I need to be looking out for?
All right, so there was a build that I'm pretty sure was by JPL that was posted up on our Heroes of the Storm website, playheroes.com/esports, and it was this build that we're seeing right now, which is Warbreaker. The idea is Casanova needs to be getting those hero pulls. Get 5 and you're going to be doing a little bit extra damage. Get 15 and you have a 3-second cooldown reduction, which puts it at 5. Then at 13, you can combo that with defensive measures, which gives you a 6-second shield when you pull a hero. So you're basically increasing your sustainability so much as the warrior, and it's really good for Casanova, for Garrosh, because he is a hero who can tend to be kited around, and so that's going to help out a lot with his sustainability. And honestly, all of these heroes, these warriors, will be able to increase that as they level up. Think about Artanis and his shielding that he gets, Dahaka, his ability to self-heal. It'll be a team that'll be difficult to give Genji those resets.
And, you know, with the Zagara pickup that we see for B-Kid there on Lag Force, we already see some focus into the Bane lanes with that volatile asset at level 1. Again, I assume the level 4 and 7s are also going to be selected because those are truly where that race potential comes in. This doesn't necessarily mean there isn't going to be split pushing, but it heavily indicates not, because you traditionally want that infest with your Nidus network. Knowing to get those range increased bonus damage is such a valuable tool to have. But we got ourselves the very first Immortal Hero, part number 2 and the series.
Very quick rotation from not Superstar, Space Station Gaming. There was my first one. Stormbolt hits, Lagaf hoping to come in and slow down the pull and the toss of Wrecking Bolt. Hits Genji, he's able to swift strike away.
Zagara's doing her own thing there up on top. Murden getting caught out. The drag being used actually interrupts the dash onto Karazim. Beautiful job there from Jason Tomster. Not going to make it out here. 2 kills coming up for Space Station Gaming already. I didn't know the Zagara doing her best onto that Immortal on her own, but it's nothing compared to this beautiful race coming out from Space Station and their 4-man squad.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it's that amateur opponent that Artanis picked up at level 1, and then Lunara doesn't do a bad job either, getting in with her attacks. Biggie's going to get on the point and just eliminate some of the shielding from the Immortal, make it so it's easier for them to be able to defend. And Zagara is going to be a very instrumental hero in the defense of these Immortals for LagF.
And the one thing I want to be focusing on is the positioning of LagF. They were very comfortable taking that fight. And you and I already addressed the concept of levels 1 through 9 here. You have a Zagara, you have the Abathur. That is not the area you typically want to be strong. You could if you didn't have the Zac because you have Murden, Abathur, Hat, Genji. That is a lethal. But once you pick the Zagara, you've got to be a bit more patient here. And so far, it is really biting them right now. Space Station Gaming find themselves a very healthy Immortal. Zuno waiting in the wakes, but he's actually scouted out there by that beautiful little Wisp. So nobody on the side of Space Station seems too concerned.
They had their eyes on trees, though, and LagF and Biggie going in concert after this. There's the Dwarf Toss with the Symbiote, too, and yeah, Lunara will be taken out. Karzim, though, goes down, too, so it's a 1-for-1, and Zuna's gone too far, especially with the pull of Groundbreaker, but making it a 2-for-2.
Yeah, and that was a very good job there from Biggie, understanding he can get the kill onto Rhaegar, making his way right on out there. This was not necessarily a win in the world of Black Force, but by taking that fight, it could have been a lot worse after the turnaround from Space Station Gaming. Definitely not optimal and leaves the Space Station Gaming with an entire level lead pre-10. And we talked about how insanely important this early game is, Gilly.
It is insanely important, as you said, especially because that fort went down before Abathur could get Mule, if Mule is the idea to get at level 7 for him. So there's no way of trying to defend that and then heal it back up to get them that extra time for LagF to get 10. And the fight goes on again. This is playing exactly into Space Station hands.
They're doing a very good job, though, getting the flank. They got to pick onto Lunara. That's the core damage. Zuna, Dwarf Toss is out before the flip can get there. Jason comes in with the Brush Dock, unable to connect with his drag. And now this is just a 1-for-1 trade here between the teams. Space Station Gaming not getting as much out of that as they would have liked.
Abathur continuing to be in the bottom, and Space Station is with this triple warrior. When they bring Jason up, there's going to be a lot of time where somebody is not solo laning. So that is at least some time where Lag Force can hope to catch up in experience if they can keep Space Station Gaming there. But it's a risky one, right? They're going into a 5v4, but at least now they have Mule, and that will help mitigate some of the damage that's going to be done to the structures. Space Station are going to start to do some damage, at least open up the fort, and get ready for the next Immortal phase.
I do want to say that what we saw from Lag Force on the way they did decide to collapse onto that was really beautiful and honestly near flawless on the way that they approached it. And a Space Station Gaming, specifically talking trees there on that Lunara, does not give enough respect to the flank between Murden, Abathur, Genji. It is going to be lethal all day. Obviously, having Ancestral Healing to be able to use onto her later on will be a really convenient tool, but we're also looking at a heavy melee composition. That generally are the targets that you want to get the Ancestral. They will get the most direct value out of that. So Talking Trees here needs to tread lightly with his positioning because the mobility between those three, more importantly the kill potential, is something that I expect to continue being a problem if they don't respect it.
Leaping Strike will also help too, depending on how the flanks are set up. You can use that to get a little bit better positioning as well. But Dahak has been taken up, and slowly LagF are climbing back into this, but Space Station still get halfway through into the Immortal. The game plan here is to get this Immortal right around when they would have heroic abilities ahead, but LagF have done exactly what they need to not fall so far behind Space Station Gaming. If they can just get through this crucial last bit of point to heroic abilities, there will be a lot more hope on the horizon for them.
Yeah, it's just stall it out, wait for the 10 mark, and then maybe take the fight afterwards, I feel, for LagF is going to be the smartest tactic. It's unreasonable that they can force that with the pre-10. They're now trying to be able to get a pickup here onto the Shaman camp. The double collapse. Tiger Decay's in a bad spot. Stormbolt is going to land there. The damage is going to be real. And another kill here for LagF. 5-5 so far through the game. But Casanova looking to join in, gets the drag, gets the flip. B-Kid in the back line on the wrong side of this one. And he's going to be going down after a really nice dash there from Equinox. But Lunara is going to be caught out as well. This is a huge skirmish.
There's going to be the pull again on Biggie, but he's so far fine. Jason's going to chase him out. Swift Strike forced to be used so that he can get away. And look at the experience bar. LagF have done it. They've caught up with Space Station. They're still likely to lose this Immortal depending on how fast they can get in and start defending. Maybe even try to get a couple of kills. But heroic abilities online for Space Station.
Gonna throw down the Purifier Beam just to try and get that damage out, but Equinox has no mana. The Ancestral does end up landing there, but Genji is taking a bit too much damage. Space Station Gaming is about to walk away with the second Immortal of the game at nearly 100% HP.
What heroic ability do we get for Zagara? She still picks Nidus Network, 7-sided strike for some additional damage for Karazim, as well as the invulnerability that it provides. Warlord's Challenge was the interesting one for me. I'm not sure yet what is going to be more meta. Did you see what was picked earlier in EU?
I actually didn't pay attention, to be honest, specifically with the European games and what they ended up going with their heroic choice. I do want to say that the fact that Nidus Network's picked up here drops a lot of value into the team fight, and suddenly those levels 1 through 9 we were concerned about, now I am heavily concerned about it because the team fight potential is going to be not there. The map hasn't opened up with both Zag and Abathur need that to happen to be effective as heroes in the later stages of the game. So suddenly, Lag Force, they were behind, now they're miles behind.
They're going to do the exact same thing. They're jumping in, hoping that they can get on top of Talking Trees, who uses the Leaping Strike as long as possible. But iDream was there with the clone, and Lunara is eliminated. Unfortunately for Lagaf, though, so was Genji. Now Garrosh goes down. Lagaf are staying in this fight.
They're going to stay in this, and it's not maybe to the best of odds for them. B-Kid trying to get the channel out. The drag's not going to land, and he makes it out of the Purifying Beam. Now the stun there. Tomster punching away, and this is Lag Force able to turn around this fight miraculously, using beautiful ins and outs of their kits to make sure that they get the upper hand. But they have to deal with this Immortal, and it will get this keep, Mule or not. Wait a minute, spoke too soon.
B-Kid comes back for the save. I can tell you what, B-Kid is very happy that he has been spreading his creep to get away from that Purifier Beam.
My goodness. So now, where do we find ourselves? After just talking about how far behind Lag Force is, and now Space Station Gaming, not necessarily ahead in experience, but they're still really, really ahead. That team fight, even though it did go beneficial for Lag Force, considering how it ended up opening, there's almost a keep down already onto the bottom half of the map, and we're yet to see Lag Force show any signs of life during the Immortal phase. So if we see them, play the Immortal phase the same way stages number 1 and 2 ended up going down, Space Station finds themselves with a huge Immortal once again, and the secondary keep, or double keep play, really waiting in front of them. So my eyes now are all about Lag Force and what they make happen over the next Immortal phase.
Yeah, how long can they stall it out? How much value and time can they give to Zagara and Abathur to soak? Space Station, ideally, if they see one of these two, or both of them out soaking, can hopefully get in and try to get some picks. But the way that Lag Force has chosen to play this just puts so much pressure on them to make sure that they play it flawlessly, because they have picked this double split pressure kind of heroes over trying to keep up with the team fighting that Space Station are wanting all the time. And Lagaf have done a great job of those team fightings up to this point, but it only takes one for Space Station now to be able to just run away with this game.
I was wondering if we were going to see Abathur commit a bit more to the split push, now knowing that their composition kind of is functioning a lot with the macro pressure they're able to get out, but they still continue with the more standard team fight-oriented Abathur build. And at first glance, I'm like, I want split pushing because I don't feel like they can win team fights, but they've been doing so well into the team fights that maybe this is a proper talent adjustment, just committing to it, because Space Station Gaming is not taking off the same way I expected them to with their composition.
I can't help but keep thinking about the fact that Lagaf they've struggled with macro games before, and so their solution, their fix, was to draft more team fighting toward the mid phase of part 1 of this phase. And then they were bringing in things like Illidan, and it was working out pretty well for them. And then they switched Zuna and B-Kid, and so then I wondered what was going to happen for them. And they draft this double specialist, but yet they're committing to team fights and doing really freaking well in them. So I'm kind of just confused about what is happening right now in this game for Lagaf. But whatever it is, it's working for them. They've healed their keep back up, and they don't have catapult pressure on them, which is of the utmost importance at this point.
I'm in the same boat. It's just not being painted the same way my brain put it out to be at the beginning of this game. They're even winning in terms of kills. Like, the structure minimap, that is exactly what I expected. But every other number and variable we see is very different than what we expected here. But now we find the exact stage I was concerned about, the Immortal phase. So they're already being very defensive here for Lag Force. They don't have too much macro pressure out, whereas Dahaka doing a very good job getting the side soak. bit of a trade there after the Storm Bolt, but it's all about, can the halftime show be kicked off here for Space Station Gaming, or is Zagara going to try and make work happen elsewhere?
Here comes the pull. Equinox in trouble. Swap comes in. Ancestral Healing allows Equinox to stay in the fight. Warlord's challenge. Tomster eliminated. No support for Lag Force, but the Genji bringing down Rhaegar makes it a 1-for-1 again on support.
Tiger JK ended up going down, but Big Impact not able to survive here either. Now we find ourselves 2 for 2. iDream just a clone, so that's just only a little bit of experience. Either way, not too big of a deal. It's Immortal Health still very heavy in favor here of Space Station Gaming. They're going to be able to kick off the halftime. It's one of those inconvenient moments there for them, just because Lag Force now has a lot of time to be able to make up for these death timers and get the zone out. So it's still near even-ish, but it's on Lag Force to make a play.
There was a throw and then an immediate drag after, so maybe some confusion between these two teams about what to do with Zuna. And Zuna, with the Abathur hat, gets a kill on Jason.
That was without Give Him the Axe, too. Like, we have the Adrenal Overload at 4, and we often talk about Murden being a surprisingly good Abathur hat target, but that's once he hits 16, he becomes an absolute monster. But Zuna is making stuff happen here. Taunt is going to be dropped. Leaping Strike bouncing left and right. Zuna's still alive here thanks to his 13 talent, and eventually is going to fall. Now the members of Space Station Gaming looking to aggress onward. Zag doing a bit of work onto that Immortal, but it's still Space Station Gaming's game to lose right now. That
was a way better position for them to get into a fight too, because Talking Trees was able to use both charges of Leaping Strike aggressively. There was no fear at all because of the choke point. I was wondering what tool or how Casanova wanted to use into the fray, and so far he's been using it to throw his allies defensively, try to help them get away. Since they are warrior heavy, it can be a problem for them that they get too far into a fight, and so he has been largely using that as a tool to help escape. It's just maybe the throw away and then dragging in some miscommunication there, leading to the demise of Jason. But all is fine for Space Station. They've been able to get the next Immortal. They're getting ready to siege down, hopefully their first keep of the game.
Yeah, it's very likely going to be with this amount of shielding onto this Immortal. The 16 talent here will be picked up relatively evenly for both sides. Lag Force is not too concerned about that. Just conveniently with the Abathur and the Zagara on their side, experience is a pretty easy tale for them. But defending against the Immortal is not quite the same case here. Keep front wall already going to be broken down. Murden gets flipped away. Zuna gets dragged immediately after. A lot of damage going in. Avatar's going to be popped. He manages to survive for now, but for how long? Leaping Strike, the Ancestral ends up landing there. Purifier being used onto Big E, but he dashes right away. Tiger JK first to fall here with Zuna going in.
I think Zuna found his hero to carry with because he has gotten through so much damage. Ends up bringing down 2 from Space Station Gaming, and a 3rd is taken out too. Equinox is going to buy some time to get his shielding back, but both he and Casanova should be able to be dealt with from the members of Lag F.
And at what cost here? Did the keep end up going down or not? If it doesn't go down, remember, there is a mule to be able to heal it up, but in fact, it is dead. Space Station Gaming can say mission complete, but once again, this is just Space Station winning every Immortal and losing at every other front of the game, but Lag Force has been unable to make anything happen because of the shortness of the death timers. Now that they are lengthened, we find them picking up the first fort of the game. I assume the second fort is going to follow quickly after here on bottom.
And with all that experience in the bank, Lag Force is starting to climb ahead even more. They've got that level lead already because of the sheer amount of time that they've been able to soak with their Abathur, with their Zagara, and because they're winning in kills miraculously. Now they take out both of the forts, and that's going to maybe be a thorn in the side of Space Station when we get into the next Immortal phase.
Oh man, I'm just, how do we find a world where the next Immortal doesn't go in the same direction is the biggest thing I'm looking for Lag F, because I mean, it's pretty apparent they can hold their own. It's just they got to do something about the way this Immortal phase is working out. I think the original thought process was use the Zagara to, with the Abathur hat, you can bully out the Dahaka in the 1v1s, and suddenly they would have so much global match pressure in one angle of the map to where the Dahaka is essentially irrelevant. Somebody has to respond to him. But there's been 0 points of the game where they have been able to do that into the downtime, into the laning phase. And now they sit 20 seconds away from what might be their demise unless that 20 spike ends up hitting, because they are not showing much when this Immortal phase connects.
They still have the full level, 19 to 20, and the bottom lane is going to be pushed pretty severely, although Zagara is going to go and try to hang out with it and make sure that she can still get the soak off of that. But the Immortal phase is going to be in time that Space Station should be able to make one type of play, even with Dahaka soaking up and trying to take out those mercenary camps before they take out the wall, the bottom wall in front of that keep.
It's up to Space Station Gaming now to try and force the hand before the 20 mark hits. And I don't know if it's going to be possible. They're not even committing to the halftime show here, really willing to retreat outward. So now expect a very patient defensive play coming out from Space Station Gaming. Lag Force doing their best, moving up here, getting the damage out, but this is not the fight they want without the 20. They need to be a bit more patient here, and let's see if Space Station can actually force this fight.
Zuna is absolutely the target now with Titan Killer, with Triple Strike. That is who they want to be able to take out first in the fight, but they have found a taunt this time on top of Genji, and with an Immortal Stun, bring him down for a full minute cooldown timer.
Huge victory here. Jason actually getting another drag on top of it. Thompson dropping the 7-sided, but it's only to delay the inevitable halftime for Space Station Gaming and an Immortal immediately afterwards. What are they going to do? They see the Zagara up on bottom. They're afraid of the clone. Zuna doing a good job getting the dismount here, realizing that Space Station Gaming wants to end this game before the Genji and the Karazin come back online.
So it's Lag Force who has the level 20, but they still don't have Genji for 30 seconds and no support. They're relying on Zuna with an Abathur hat and the Zagar to try to stop this. Space Station Gaming move onto the core. The Mule has been dropped, hoping that it can heal it back up in a way to get enough time. One person has dropped, and it is Rhaegar, so there is no supporting, no healing now, but still Equinox with his damage has been able to cut through. Casanova's on it. Casanova doesn't do too much. It's just
about
trees,
trees,
really.
They don't have this. 20%. Jason with the passive. I don't think he's got the healing. 13 and counting. That is just stalling it out. We have a Mule here for Lag Force to heal that puppy right on up. And Immortal is free for the taking with 30 seconds for the first member to come online.
And Beacon goes right back into lane.
This might be Lag Force's game. They just got the turnaround and stall out that they needed thanks to Space Station Gaming getting a bit too eager after only 2 kills.
Nobody else is heading there yet. Genji's...
They just clone and end. All right, so they're going for the safer play then. We're going to see the Immortal play it stall out slower. I'm surprised at the lack of resources committed to this Immortal at the slow pace at which they've been willing to move it, considering how few on bottom. But in the end, it feels like Lag Force will still get what they need here.
Yeah, there was obviously some moving around trying to figure out what the best play was. Genji started to head to the Zagara. The double Zagara clone was able to do a lot of damage, and then Zagara coming back in took out the keep. This does mean that they need to try to push top as best as they can, because that is where the Immortal is going, which is why they focus into making sure to get the Khosra camp there. That starts pushing the camp, that makes sure that Space Station doesn't get any extra defense time on top of this Immortal.
Okay, so we've seen 3 Immortals where we know what it looked like when Lag Force was trying to defend, but we've never taken a look at how good it can Space Station defend. It's actually pretty bad. Other than the Artanis is very good at damage potential, but his positioning is pretty much non-existent whenever he's getting damage onto the Immortal itself. Other than Garrosh being a major direct threat into the flip and the swap potential coming out from the Artanis, I do feel like this is going to be very difficult into a double Zagara, which I expect to come out for Lag Force here onto this key.
Yeah, you can see Trees is the only one doing damage so far. As soon as the shielding is brought down, Equinox can move into a better positioning. But with the stuns and the throwback, it's just way too critical of a positioning to get in there. There's going to be a double Mirage. It's the second time we've seen that. This has been used now on Equinox.
It's all about if they can get a pick to be able to move on to the core, because the shielding has been removed rather low. iDream doing a good job getting the zone. That's stun going out onto Artanis, and he ends up dropping. That is going to be the very first pick. Beautiful Ancestral going down. iDream still holding his own. Tiger JK is trying to claw his way out. 7-sided seals the deal. And Gilly, Lag Force, turns around game number 1 on Battlefield of Eternity.
With a Mule, an Abathur, a Muradin, and a Zagara, they hold their core and turn it around to win game number 1 versus Space Station Gaming with an unconventional draft played in a way that we were not at all expecting. Lag Force said they came in with plans, and that is now obvious. It was awesome.
It was awesome. And now suddenly everything, as always in North America, when you think you got it figured out, it is suddenly is just going to go ahead and turn around and get a little bit weirder here. I mean, by no means do I suddenly go like, this is a new version of Lag Force, but it was a very concentrated, improved version coming out from them. And then also, suddenly we get to see Space Station, they've got to feel more confident. They've gone through the boot camp. They've had downtime to feel like they've grown as a squad, and to walk out, lose game number 1 to Lag Force, got to shake the confidence a bit.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would maybe keep them from doing that is it is Battlefield of Eternity, and we mentioned the long-running success that Lag Force has had on that particular Battleground, Battlefield of Eternity. But what happens when Infernal Shrines pops up, or when Cursed Hollow, a favorite of Space Station Gaming, comes in, or a favorite of the old Space Station Gaming? We don't know what has developed because of the boot camp, but that's the one thing that maybe I would keep in mind, is knowing that Battlefield of Eternity was the first map.
And, you know, to take a little bit of what we experienced from the international performances that we got between Western and Eastern Clash, I feel like one thing to note too is we knew the compositional strengths and what generally we expected to kind of see coming out from Lag Force, and it wasn't played in that exact same way. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a really good thing. I'm not totally sold in that case that it was, especially with, I mean, looking at how the game kind of played out. Their downtime with the Immortal phase, maybe a little bit cleaner on the side of Space Station, could have been an easy win in the other direction. So playing a composition where you aren't playing it maybe to its strengths, and again, not saying that they weren't able to do that in there, is a huge concern. It's one that I wanted to relate to the Eastern team, specifically Chinese region, when they play a composition and it's amazing, but they aren't necessarily playing to the exact strengths of that comp. Is it actually a compositional strength, or is it even really that good if you get those wins in those cases? So I'm going to be curious on what that means for the drafts, and more importantly, the results here for Lag Force in games 2, 3, 4.
And we saw our first Garrosh of North America, and we've seen it here and there in bans and picks in Europe. And we actually got a chance to talk to some of our players about what they think of our newest hero in the Nexus, so let's check it out.